job, really well-paying job. We are the most accurate in the world as per popular benchmarks now. It has the Dugalji behavior, keeps forgetting me as a user. The ones who will struggle to find a job or will be displaced are the ones who
Hey, hi, hello. First of all, thank you everyone for showing so much of support, and I did not expect so many people actually watching the podcast. So I'm very happy about it. And today we are interviewing and dropping Gaurav. He's the founder of Maximum AI. He has worked earlier in multiple companies. He's been a product manager at Flipkart. And we are interviewing him today and we are dropping him to his office. So let's see how it goes. Thank you. My name is Swastik. I've been doing interviews now of founders largely. Not specific to AI, but I was reading a lot on Maximum and overall memory AI and how it's so fresh as a space. Like it's so fresh. Like you can't have. I couldn't read that much because there is not that much. Like there is a lot on the tech part of it.
Yeah.
But for me to understand, oh, someone would have built this, and then on this layer, someone would have gone like how most of the startups are, right? Someone does the 0 to 1, and then someone else does 1 to 2, and so on and so forth.
Correct.
So I couldn't figure out a lot of. There was Memo AI. There were a few other companies who are just here. So yeah, like can we start from there and then go back to what were you doing in the past? So like in my head, the first thing I thought was the Dugalji from a movie of
Mujhse Shaadi
Karogi, where every day he wakes up and he's a different guy.
Yeah.
Right? And then I was like, this is what maybe he's trying to solve, that it should not be a different guy every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like this. So can you help me explain what is that you are solving and how does it work?
So December of 2024, I think AI agents as a term was just coming up.
Yeah.
And everyone was super gung-ho about it. I was so gung-ho that I quit my job, really well-paying job, thinking, okay, I'm going to do something that's going to, create a dent in the universe with respect to one of these new problems that are now surfacing that we can solve using AI agents. So, yeah, I mean, I was looking to, build something that helps one of the business functions that I helped create at my previous company, customer success.
Okay.
Not to be confused with customer support, of course, but customer success is someone who, after a customer has been onboarded onto a B2B software, helps them succeed using the product and, obviously has a tighter loop on feedback and so on.
Yeah.
So I evaluated that space. Thinking AI agents is a solved problem. Frontier Labs have created everything and so on and so forth. And then I land upon the harsh reality that my own personal productivity on AI is not as much as I had wanted it to be. It works great in some parts, but then there are some practical challenges because it has the Dugalji behavior, keeps forgetting me as a user. And this is like early 2025. So ChatGPT has something called as memory, which is like 15 items it will remember about you.
Yeah.
Overall, net. And agents, suffer with this problem that you got to like append the whole conversation thus far over and over again in every subsequent agent call, which makes it really expensive.
Yeah.
So like instead of solving for customer success, let me solve for the infrastructure for it, which is built in the agent memory space. And I wanted to scratch my personal itch first. So I kicked off. So I actually firstly tried out the existing solutions, and I found them to be quite subpar. Then I found one solo founder who was building in this space, and I was in San Francisco at that time.
Okay.
So I set up time with this founder, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to like build together? You're solo, I'm solo."
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, I'm pretty comfortable doing this all by myself." So like, yeah, sure. So came back to India, set up a team.
So came back to India, like, I'm sorry, but I would just go deeper there. It's a big decision going back. Like
no, I was working here. I was just this was a to and fro.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was a to and
So
fro. Okay.
yeah, I was just visiting San Francisco, not really lived there,
Sure. Okay.
for work purposes or anything.
But largely people move to San Francisco to build, right?
Yeah. So I would not say it is not on the cards,
Okay.
but there are a lot of other personal life, family life dynamics that I need to take care of.
Fair.
So it is inevitable, but there's the fixed timeline to it.
Okay.
So yeah, I came back, I set up a small team, we started hacking around quickly, we built out a product that was superior in every term, be it experience, be it quality of how it remembers, how fast it remembers, and then started building a layer of applications around it. And then obviously switched on to building it for AI agent builders as well,
Yeah.
which is the original problem that we wanted to sort of address. Shipped that product about 20 days back, and we are the most accurate in the world as per popular benchmarks now. So
Yeah.
that's what we're doing.
So if you can give me an example, right? So I am assuming there are two different kind of products that you are offering. One is very personal to a person, and the
Correct.
other is to the, let's say, businesses
Yes.
who are operating and who are having AI agents, right? So if I have to look at it from a business perspective, so can you give me one situation where what was not working and how will it work eventually if maximum, I think it's Synapse as a product,
Yeah.
right? How would that fit in and how would that solve the problem?
Yeah, sure. So you've been with Leap and Meesho. I'll take
Yep.
those examples, right?
Yeah.
Let's say Meesho's, building a customer success, customer support agent, right?
Yeah.
It essentially wants, users to be able to log complaints, have queries around their purchases, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, these are people who, just want their question to be answered. They don't care if there is an agent on the other side or there's a human.
Fair.
So they would expect it to behave a little human-like
Yeah.
in not just the language
Very human-like,
or the words, but also in terms of how do they remember the flow of the conversation. Now, if Meesho were to do this without us, what they would do essentially is LLMs or the AI APIs by definition are stateless, which means every API is a fresh call. It doesn't remember anything that has happened in the past.
Got it.
So when you're making a call,
Huh.
the first call, let's say the customer reaches out and says, "Hi, I want to buy this particular product. Here's a link. Can you tell me a little more about it?"
Yeah.
And the agent takes that as one single call and responds to it. Now, in the subsequent call,
Huh.
when the customer says, "Okay, but do you have it in red?"
Huh.
And now, what the agent will have to do is have to take the first customer request,
Huh.
the agent response,
Huh.
both combined,
Huh.
and send it back along with how is it available in red. And as you can imagine, as the conversation progresses,
Huh.
the amount of information that the LLM needs to send back, or the agent needs to send back to the LLM API, just keeps increasing significantly. And
Oh.
what that leads to is significantly larger API bill.
Okay.
And API is built on tokens. Tokens are at a very 30,000 feet view.
Yeah.
0.75 words is one token.
Got it.
Okay.
Huh.
So imagine every single time you're prepending the entire conversation, you're increasing the API bill.
Got it.
And that's just problem one. Problem number two is, as you keep stuffing more and more information to it, AI tends to hallucinate. It tends to forget some parts. It will be very selective about remembering some parts.
Yeah.
So that's problem number two. That's the recall problem. Third is, it is all hunky-dory if it is just one conversation. Now, let's say for whatever reason the customer moves away because there's someone at the door or they were in a meeting. They come back after 2 hours. The agent firstly treats it as a fresh conversation and does not remember what happened in the past. If it does remember, it does not remember the relative timestamps, the relative dates, etc. And it will keep doing the same behavior, which is preparing the whole conversation over and over and over. So increased token cost again, increased context rot, and that's the term that we use for the AI hallucinating when you give it too much information.
Got it.
And it has, no good way of knowing what happened in the past if you do not prepend the whole conversation again.
Like, I would just want to give you a situation.
Mhm.
This is very recent. So I raised a support ticket. So logged in on the dashboard, raised a support ticket, and they said they'll get back to me. Now I wanted to, and this is happening through one of their AI agent inside built, right? So next day I again want to know what has happened to my ticket.
Yeah.
So I raise a complaint. Now they are like, can you get that ticket number for me?
Yeah.
Now I have to go on my email, check that ticket number, come
Yeah.
back and give it to the agent.
Yeah.
But then also the agent was not able to recall what has happened.
Yeah.
So I had to again write everything that I am facing through, give the screen recordings, give the screenshots of the problem I am facing.
Yeah.
So you're saying that through this, if let's say Taboola would have integrated,
Yeah.
this problem would have not been there for the customer like me, or like I'm someone who's spending on your platform, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm a valuable customer, right?
Yeah.
And if this is the user experience I'll get, I will try to search for different platforms. Though appreciation to the founder that he responded to me on Twitter and he got it solved.
Yeah.
So like I do have that, but I don't want to face this problem.
Of
right?
course.
And like these are the same problems we are facing in all the ad platforms, honestly, right
Yeah.
now, since I am into that category. So I see that there has to be some sort of solution, right?
Yeah.
It can't be that frustrating for a person who is spending money. Like
Yeah.
it's not even that. So yeah.
No, and I just took a customer support example because it is the easiest to explain. But
Yeah.
let's look at it from this lens. Any human to human interaction in businesses
Huh.
or any augmentation of human behavior that we have been wanting to do for a long time, any automation, has largely been a workflow. So the challenge of the workflow is that it has a set number of steps. It has set branching. It knows how to act and when to act and what to do. The challenge in the agent universe is that this is no more true, right? Which means you need the agency of an agent to truly define what behavior should be exhibited at any given point of time within certain guardrails. And you give your agent a bunch of tools just like you would give it to a human. And when you expect your agent to, sort of run amok in the wild within the guardrails and do a bunch of business objectives for you, you cannot not have, the most accurate version of the facts that have transpired, both, within the customer interacting with the agent, as well as the agent interacting with its own tools. So agent has access to a lot of tools.
Oh, so it also solves the other side.
Yes.
Got it.
And now the really smart agents
Huh.
spin up a bunch of sub agents. Think of
Yeah.
it like, if you were the founder of a company, you would give a task to a manager, and the manager would then give it to their subordinates, and so on. Right? That chain of command works beautifully.
Yeah.
But then the information percolation has to happen at all levels.
Yeah.
And if it keeps happening only serially,
Yeah.
the challenge is every time you do serial percolation, you will have, summarization loss.
Okay, I might not be aware about it, but can you double it down? So I am looking at like an army. There
Yeah.
is a head of the army.
Yeah.
Then there are few ministers, and under few ministers there are sort of soldiers.
Yeah.
Right. So you're saying a head of the army says a thing.
Yeah.
It passes on to the ministers,
Mhm.
and then to them. So I'm saying that there is a Chinese whisper that happens, that you feel, that you think that happens, and through the contextual memory,
Yeah.
it would not happen.
Exactly.
Because of, and the serial percolation from the soldiers back to the head of army.
Oh yeah, so that's the best part, right? So, serially, when you just organize this, you would have information percolation only one, or bi-directional, but in only one channel, right? Which means siblings cannot learn from each other. Which means if the CEO just wants to poll the the leaf node employee directly, they cannot do it. But here, by way of architecting it in a manner that there's a shared memory access and controlled scoping, everyone knows and can go and access whatever information they need at any given point of time, which means they don't have to just rely on the chain of command working. Just take an example. in this chain of command, one of the agent nodes fails for whatever reason, right? And agents are just pieces of software, they fail.
Yeah.
Tool call fails, network fails, whatever happens, right?
Yeah.
And then the main agent who actually spinned off all these bunch of agents
Yeah.
is now not able to access some information that it ideally should be able to. That's also something that Synapse helps you solve for. And then this becomes more and more relevant. So customer support is obviously a great use case and it is very out there, but this becomes more and more spelled out when you think of long running tasks, like if you're doing like extreme deep research, if you're creating an agent that helps you create literally a performance marketing ad creative. That's a massive pipeline of things that the agent swarm needs to do.
If I'm building an AI team like of agents, right?
Yeah.
So interesting. So I read a tweet recently by Harshil Mathur, the Razor founder. So he wrote something very it said that if you want to read good fiction, read the tech roadmap of any company this year, right? Because everything is evolving so fast.
Absolutely.
Right? And then we are seeing so many so I'm now shifting a conversation towards overall AI industry and how are we looking at it, right? And I'm seeing I feel that honestly it's like a ghost. Everyone knows that there is something, trying to figure out what is there. There are people who say that they have seen it, but no one's able to come up with what would happen eventually. There's no clarity which I'm able. And I've been reading every blog coming from every person. Sam Altman recently got attacked by people, and there are so many things that are happening, right? And Claude saying that we will have Claudes to build Claude, eventually by 2030 or something, right? How do you process this, first of all, these kind of informations? Because maybe you are in tech, right? But you are building in AI, right? So you have a deeper contextual understanding of these things, right? But for people like me who are in the creative zone, and then there would be people who might not be even aware about this much of things that are happening, right? So how do you and how do you process these kind of informations? Okay, what does it? Is it a noise? Is it a signal? How do you define it? And then how do you look at it, from the futuristic POV as well?
So I'll draw you back to something very interesting called as the Gartner's hype cycle.
Okay.
Gartner is it's an industry review company that reviews a lot of software, right? So specifically B2B software infrastructure and so on. Gartner has this concept of a hype cycle when it says that every technology, I'm just paraphrasing right now, every technology goes through, this is going to burst out, to this is absolutely worthless, to then realizing the mid path, right? Now, unfortunately or fortunately, AI skipped a few steps here, right? Or let me rephrase this. AI had these cycles move significantly faster, and it's actually running inside of a loop. So what that is leading to is a lot of disillusionment about what AI can do today versus it cannot do today, right? But yes, the pace is quite unnerving. It is really fast. It will displace large amounts of labor, to begin with knowledge labor, and then gradually even physical labor.
And I'll give you an example. The knowledge labor versus physical labor, right? So there was a concept of shooting ads at one point of time in my life, where we used to have a whole production and shoot ads, proper ads for UGCs and for performance.
Of course,
right? I'm not kidding. At this moment, and we have done enough number of tests, and there are enough industry standards that have been set that AI UGC ads are performing better now, right? Where a person is just coming, talking about the product and all of that. Now there were 16 people involved in doing that. Once you do it offline, you have a venue and there is a gaffer who is shadowing the lights and stuff like that. All of that is gone for a toss. So earlier I used to believe that knowledge labor will, but now I am seeing that even physical, there's a whole industry that survives on this thing, right? So this might also impact them.
I think you've taken a great example, right? So just this morning I was trying out a tool. This is from an ex-skip manager and also a senior from college, and very revert tech guy. He built out a new company that helps you create just product launch videos. Not just any UGC, but just product launch videos.
Got it.
And I was just trying out the product this morning. Very, very rich product, and great capabilities, follows the workflow, follows the instinct, and so on. But every text field was making me think really, really hard. And that continues to be the core of what humans add into this whole AI value system, or into the growth of how humankind moves, is our creativity. You give the same amount of context to 10 AI tools, and you'll still find them, regurgitating most of the observed behaviors, and it does not create a very creative set of solutions. I'll take another example. Last weekend we were at a hackathon setting up a booth, and in the run up to it, I was trying to come up with some creative ideas of drawing people to my booth. And even before I had kicked off a Claude Co-work project and started brainstorming with Claude, I was just having chai with my 2 team members, and we were just discussing a couple of things. And we came up with 5 ideas in 1 minute. Eventually, after all the same amount of context that I gave to Claude Co-work, it could not come anywhere close to the creativity that we had in 5 minutes of having chai. That's a massive difference, right? That's not just a context difference, that is also a creativity difference. And creativity is still one of the rather untouched part of how AI models are able to perform. So I think humans will continue to hold the creative prowess. That's A. Secondly, creativity is not just about Marcom. It's a literally every facet of life.
Like I also look at it.
So when we are building products, the most important decisions are the ones that we take fully off AI. So we have a strict rule. We are a team of 3. We have a strict rule. We don't build anything until we have written a detailed handwritten document about it. Now, if you want to enhance the document using AI, post facto, after we have dumped our thoughts and organized them well, made architectural choices, made good technical product choices, etc. We don't give it to any AI tool, and that really helps us become better. If we were just following what AI tools were giving us, it would land us at the same common minimum. Right? So
are you saying that? Are you saying that if you will make those decisions using AI, then the moat of the business will go off because there is not a deeper thinking happening in making those decisions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fair.
And to go back to the original aspect of your question, how do I think about the whole the AI apocalypse? Is I believe it is far away. It will displace jobs, but it will not displace jobs to the same quantum that we all are believing it will. If anything, it will help us think of newer ways of creating value in the universe. Before Industrial Revolution, when the steam boiler was created, I think everyone would have panicked that where are the jobs going to be, but they moved on to something else. We don't know what that something else is. It could be AI or something new. And secondly, and most importantly, I think human pursuit of its own free will will actually become better, and I believe we'll have a happier universe as long as we can figure out some critical aspects about the economics of it, which is for the world leaders to sort of
figure out it.
Take a stab at it.
Cool. So let's go back now to your journey. I want to know, where did you study? How did you come up with engineering, and then how did your career path move to finally land where you are? What were the highlights of decision making, maybe?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I was always clear I wanted to be an engineer. For no women fancy, I was just clear that I wanted to be an engineer because I grew up to a 2-year elder brother who always wanted to be a doctor. So, Indian household, that's the only other option that you have.
No, there's a lot of research done. My
Yeah.
elder brother is an engineer, and that's why I'm not. It's very simple. Like, you don't do what your elder brother does.
Yeah.
And in fact, most of the athletes
Mhm.
that have performed better
Mhm.
are always the younger siblings.
Okay.
Because when they were young, their older siblings were beating them out. So they've
Yeah.
always tried competing out. So
Very
yeah, there's
interesting.
a research done on it.
Very,
But
very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, so I always wanted to be an engineer. I gravitated towards computers. Um, started building websites when I was in 7th standard because I took a summer course at a computer institute near my house.
Okay.
And then I went to Mumbai University for my bachelor's in engineering, computer science. Studied for the 4 years, built a bunch of things. Graduated, took a job, studied MBA, and then moved into product management,
Okay.
which is essentially where I started going like much deeper into the non-technical side of product building,
Okay.
and gradually also into building much larger and scaled products. So I was very fortunate to work with both early stage startups, late stage startups, large companies, and the mix really helped me. And also got a great set of managers to work with. So always got continuously challenged on what I could do next. In between I did like one startup in 2015, 16, 17, and that bombed.
But you were in Bangalore back when you did that one?
I was partly in Bangalore. I spent about a quarter in Bangalore and then 3 quarters in Mumbai.
Yeah.
Because funnily, for that 1 quarter, I was helping out another startup with another product
Yeah.
while I was just building mine so
Yeah.
that I could build some runway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
A mistake that I would not do again.
yeah, same. So I was also providing services while
Yeah.
building, so realized may not be the best case
Yeah.
scenario. Yeah. So while you were at a early stage startup, what was it? Can I take the name of it?
Yeah,
It was Flipkart, I guess, right? No.
early stage I was with Common Floor,
Okay.
Craftsvilla.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the kind of difference you see in terms of working in an early stage startup versus a, let's say, a late stage or well-funded kind of startup? Like, what are the kind of differences you see while you're working there?
Yeah, I think the single biggest difference is the pace. Early stage startups just move insanely fast. They don't go into those analysis paralysis loops. They're like, okay, let's build something, ship it, observe the data, and learn from it, as opposed to make it perfect. Because obviously the cost of failure is significantly lower, right? Not that many people know you, so it's okay if you fail. That's one of the biggest things. The second thing is obviously the culture, which is partly driven by the build piece itself, but partly it is also, you don't set like artificial limits. There are no teams. Even if there are teams, you can just walk up to the other person and tell him, hey, I was thinking about this, what do you think? And that person will be like, hey, you know what, do you want to like build this with us for a week and then go back to whatever your regular programming is? So very open, very flat culture. You could walk into the CEO's office, the founder's office at any point of time and just have a chat with them. Some of these things are like really fun. Like as a second startup that I was, that was an early stage startup that I worked at. I was product manager number 1. Like before that, the CEO was the only product manager. So it was really interesting to both understand his vision of the business, and then bring in my set of processes, while continuously earning the trust of the engineering team, the operations team. It was an e-commerce company, so a lot of moving parts. Very different journey depending upon what kind of company we're talking about.
I'll just double click on this point which you said that which happens in early stage startups, where you try to do hacky stuff to make it through and then build it, right? And so this is like I feel ideally comes from the entire Paul Graham's a lot of essays where he has mentioned that how you need to keep doing hacky things to come up, right?
do things that don't scale.
do things that don't scale, do them enough number of times to figure out whether right. So post AI, do you feel there is a change of thought in this principle fundamentally? Because to build things which are well, like whatever it is, has now become easier, right? So do you think now people should, like, because it's not like earlier if you had to build a website and do all of that part, it used to take time. So you used to just do something hacky, old website, make copy change, like whatever, like basic things.
Correct.
You try to do that, right? Now it is so easy that, do you think that people should shift from that thought, or does the thought still stays there, or it's now has become one level up that you need to think deeper? It's not just the, let's say, the website or whatever it is, you have to think deeper on what you are offering, and us hisab se you have to bid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we did not get access to these tools in silos. Everyone got access to these tools. It's a level playing field.
Yeah.
It has never been a more level playing field than earlier, right? So earlier, if only someone could really afford a great designer is when they could put out a great looking website. Only if someone could afford a great copywriter is when they could write great copy on their website or their product. That field has just shifted, which means the hackiness has moved from do something and then do it better to be more creative about what are you going to even put outside, right? And that impacts at multiple levels, right? So because there's just, every channel is saturated, everything is noise, so you really need to like create things that are differentiated when they land, or else they have death on arrival. To that extent, I think the job has become significantly tougher, and the hackiness now needs to be in getting to that differentiated narrative, or differentiated landing, or differentiated distribution channel, as opposed to just creating something and shipping it fast. So I think the baseline has shifted. You still need to be scrappy. You still need to be fast. Just like AI as a tool is not accessible only to us, creativity as a tool is also not accessible only to us. And I'm just astonished at the number of times the great idea that I thought of was something that was so unique to me, I find 5 other people chasing that same idea. And I'm not even talking about like a product category or something. I'm talking about a very niche of a niche of a niche. So yeah, I mean, you got to still move fast and still see if it has any teeth.
But then there is another theory which a lot of people keep putting, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Like if you have to move fast, and like I am trying to understand how does a company define the pace of building that company? Like, so there are 2 things, right? One is an external effect, like someone is taking your market share or someone is building, so you have to keep moving faster so that you keep owning the market share, right? And another thing is internal, right? Every company has, like, the day they think that they are building something, they need to have some sort of values on which they are building, and it defines the company eventually, right? So how does just say speed over perfection as a principle, how does that come in, and where does that come in for you? Like, it has nothing to do with other company. Everyone has a very personal opinion in these cases. So how does that come in for you?
Very deliberately, all one-way doors are to be taken slow. All two-way doors need to be really, really fast. And this is the exact language of Jeff Bezos. I'm an ex-Amazonian, so you'll see a lot of that sprinkled in my life and vocab both. We could actually take a left.
We take a left.
Sorry. So, obviously, I mean, there is nothing called strictly a one-way door, but one-way doors are doors that are more expensive to come back from. And that judgment is what your experience teaches you, right? So you got to be like developing this continuous sense of what is going to be an expensive one-way door, or rather expensive two-way door, or a absolute one-way door, and then be very deliberate around those pieces, right? For example, we built out the MVP of our second product in 4 weeks flat. We could have just shipped it as is, but I knew like the first 5 customers touching it would work great. The 6th customer touching it would just break out. And I was very clear that I'm not going to ship any of this ever because, of my principle that I want to ship like high quality production grade, enterprise grade software. So took another month and a half to just make sure we build and ship it in the right architecture as opposed to just shipping it raw. Did it cost us some market share? Absolutely yes, but nothing that cannot be recovered. What cannot be recovered, unfortunately, is the initial perception. If someone tries it out and says, hey, it barely works, that's really hard to recover from, unless you are like creating a category. That's a different story. We were not creating a category. We were slightly late to the category. So we know, what was going to be our differentiator, and it's better to be, rather deliberate around it than just being fast.
Interesting. Yeah, now that I think of it, there are so many products which now are doing great, but when I used them, they were not good. So my perception for the longest time remained. Like, for example, HeyGen, right?
Yeah.
Like when HeyGen was launched, I even got a chance to talk to the founder, right? And had a conversation. And this is 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The product was not good. And since then, I had a perception that product is not good.
Yeah.
They have now, like recently I tried using it again for something, and now it's too good.
Yeah.
And I was like, for 2 years, and that could have been for so many people who would have used it back then, that they were just assuming that it is not good because the first launch of it is not good.
Yeah.
So that becomes very sacrosanct for the launch, that your product has to be that good that the person sticks to it.
Absolutely.
Interesting. But does it change once you are, because maybe you are like, is the thought coming because you are building a B2B, right?
Yeah.
Or like for the enterprise edition, largely, does the thought change once you are building for consumer edition?
Absolutely, it does. So consumers are
Because the risk goes down,
so
is it?
so there are 2 aspects to it. Okay.
Yeah.
When you're building B2B and you're having those initial design partner conversations with those specific businesses, they are extremely forgiving.
Yeah.
Consumers, on the other hand, if you make a tall promise and you do not deliver it, or deliver it less than, let's say, 60-70%, then they're extremely unforgiving. Right. But consumers, if you're in a category that is really painful and you're doing it at a differentiated no-brainer offer, are really forgiving. Versus B2B, if you're going to make a fundamental blunder like on security or on compliance or on scalability or reliability, they're going to be unpardoning. Except, the design partners, I think they sign up for it and they get a differentiated offer for that reason.
God.
Yeah.
So another question is that you said you have a 3 people team.
Yeah.
I read some news somewhere that 5 people team or 3 people team building such a huge deal out of it in this category. How? Like, it sounds like, I know there are people who are saying that with AI 2 people can build a unicorn.
Yeah.
There are these kind of tweets we keep reading here and there, but once you start executing, you start realizing that after AI also you need people, right? And like how does that work? Because initial stage my hiring also is very, very tricky. Like it is not as, maybe once you have done certain rounds or you are at a certain level, the hiring becomes very different, right? But once you are building initially, you are actually, I call it like a pillar of a company, right? Those initial people define everything. Whoever comes new, because you are not defining culture right now. Culture is 3 people talking to each other. So how do you do that? Like how have you done the hiring, or the thought of that, okay, we'll keep it lean and as lean as 3, like that's it.
I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. Being a bootstrap founder, you can afford only a certain amount. So you want to get the best talent in that amount, and the best talent that can do the right kind of work, move mountains, work in tandem with you, share the hunger for the vision that you are trying to pursue. And that's been our approach, which means we brought in a bunch of people, 4 people as interns. 2 of them were good enough for me to convert them into full-timers. They quit their undergrad. Now they're full-time employees with us.
I'm sorry, you made 2 people quit their undergrads?
Yeah.
And what were the reactions of their parents?
I think they were very supportive. Like that's the best that I know.
Okay.
And these people were like eager to do it.
And where are they from? Like Bangalore itself?
Bangalore, yeah. So
But like they came from different part of the country, or they
different
were-
parts of the country, yeah. And someone's from Agra, someone's from Bhopal.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, I mean it's a necessity. Now, is it insufficient? Absolutely. And we keep bringing in interns from time to time for specific tasks. We ask, for example, I have a friend who works at Meta.
Hmm.
He's on a paternity break, just chilling, in India now
Okay.
for a while.
Hmm.
And he was very curious about what I'm doing. And he's like, you know what? Do you need some help with your GTM? I was like, yeah, I need help with this 1 or 2 parts that I'm not getting the time to prioritize. So he's just picked that mantle up for nothing. Just a friend trying to help out of his curiosity and out of the willingness to help me.
It's a builder
Yeah.
gene. It's a builder.
It's a builder gene, yes. Then I have friends, ex-colleagues
Huh.
from different companies that I've worked at, all reaching out to me saying, hey, you know what, I'd love to join your mission. And I'm like, hey, sorry, I cannot afford you right now. They're like, no, I just want to do it on the side, like just help you out. It's an interesting space, it's an interesting problem. You seem to have created a dent in it. We'd love to contribute. So, if you lead with the vision, I think people sort of rally behind you.
Yeah.
That
Because
really helps.
I've realized that it's not. So see, the thing is that it's vision
Mhm.
is only like the thing is the vision transfer happens with movement.
Yeah.
So it only starts with the movement. Like
Correct.
there will be people who will be coming, and that's the kind of validation. But if I have to double down,
Mhm.
how do you figure out that this talent is someone I want to have?
Oh yeah.
How do you see that? What are the signalings you look at? And it can be from any lens. Like, see, one is skill set,
Yeah.
which I think is objectively easier to map. But then there are a lot of subjective things you have to look at in a person
Yeah.
to have them on board, right? And how do you look at those subjective things?
Yeah. So I think, as you rightly mentioned, skill set is just the hygiene bar.
Yeah.
The most important thing for me is hunger. It has to be insatiable hunger. You could call it passion, you could call it energy, you could call it anything. But all of it just, gets derived from hunger. So I absolutely just love working around hungry people who would put my hunger to shame. And I'm an extremely hungry, really competitive guy since very early childhood, middle class Indian
Yeah.
mindset. So, yeah, I mean, I just need people to be really hungry.
But how do you look at, like, what
think
are
it
the
shows
kind of
up.
signals you look
So
at?
it shows up, right? So their willingness to go above and beyond, their willingness to go beyond their defined role, them caring about what we are pursuing and how are we pursuing it, them being open to challenging directly. And it's not easy for someone who's probably 15 years younger to me. It's not easy for them to just challenge me on something that I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it is their hunger that gives them that motivation to challenge directly. And it's also their hunger that manifests in them rallying behind insane product benchmarks that we set for ourselves. Right? It's very easy to do a job and say, yeah, I did it. You asked me to do something, I did it. It's very difficult to say, I did this, and then I thought about it, and then I did more, and then I thought more about it, and then I looked at the data, and then I iterated further.
Okay.
And
Do you
then-
think hunger will become a differentiating factor between AI?
It already is. It always has been, in my opinion. I think the best careerists have had insatiable hunger thus far, and in the AI world, I think the gap will just increase significantly more. The ones who will struggle to find a job or will be displaced are the ones who have been doing just the right amount of work to not get fired. They are going to be at the most amount of risk.
Fair.
And I think it's also important to touch upon this because it's a very sensitive topic, that hunger also needs to be rewarded how it is manifested. So you cannot bundle the hunger into a price bucket
Yeah.
and then expect it to insatiably grow over the period of time. It
Yeah.
won't, right?
Yeah.
So you got to allow it to grow, and that only happens if you remove the question of money.
But do you think, like, okay, so here is my question.
Yeah.
Like, I have this way of looking at people. I see a lot of tier 2
Mhm.
and maybe tier 2-ish, 3, like the urban crowd having insane amount of hunger.
Yeah.
Right? Their exposure to the maybe like things, like for example, they'll be underconfident, but they'll be 10x doing
Yeah.
great work at what they are
Yeah.
at. Like their craft would be amazing, right? So the amazing writers I have met all my life in my creative industry, most of them are from like random कानपुर के पास कोई उरई करके विलेज है, वहां से आते हैं. And then you'll see their story. छोड़िए, आप उनका काम देखोगे, you'll be like, यार ये क्या कर रहे हो आप, like this is insane. And they'll be like 3 years younger to me, and I'll be like, भाई आपका ये काम, like it puts your work to shame.
Yeah.
कि whatever you have done is nothing compared to what this person has done.
Absolutely.
But for the reward ratio is so like skewed. Plus, like I also feel कि maybe they are not aware. Like the reward ratio of hunger is not justifiable at times, I feel. And is it because कि हम, like, do we not look at the socialist lens inside a capitalism lens? Like how does that function? Like, is it a person to person thing? Kya, like now comes the subjective questions, right?
Yeah.
Things like empathy, things like ethics, which we see like diminishing in the senior leader. Like for me, it was always like someone who is becoming senior and who is getting into senior leadership, they'll have to be much more ethical
Yeah.
to let it trickle down. And we have
Yeah.
seen it not just in companies but in countries and overall. And it's getting down because there is no upside of having a lot of ethics.
Yeah. So
How do you justify that to yourself?
I'll come to both the comments, right? I'll come to your comment on a person in Urai who's really hungry but is not being proportionately rewarded. I think your own hunger or your own career, for that matter, is only exactly one person's responsibility, and that is yours. So you got to find ways of assessing your true value, including your hunger and not just your skill set. And once you've done that, you got to ask for the right value for your book. And then you do so, and you are not able to get it, then you should go to another place where your time, energy, skill set is valued proportionately. There are no two ways about it, right? Now, this always does not have to be cash, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, at an early stage startup, you might think, oh, I'm being paid barely anything, but the work is just insane.
Yeah.
But you should get compensated in equity,
Yeah.
or in ESOPs, right? So as long as that is happening,
Huh.
I think you are earning your own right. If you're not doing that, then you have to go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, what is this hunger even driven by? Is it just driven by wanting to create a dent in the universe without having taken care of yourselves? And if it is that, then world hunger is at your disposal. Maybe you want to solve that rather than
Fair, yeah.
building software.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's how I look at the first problem. The second piece is the diminishing value of increasing ethic. I honestly feel like there is exactly one person that you are answerable to, and that person you see a few times in the mirror every day. And if you cannot answer to them, then how will you be able to answer to anyone else? So I do not believe it is a diminishing factor. It is, in fact, okay, let me bring this down to like a really stupid level. Okay, humans love loving themselves.
Okay.
Being ethical is one of the easiest ways of loving yourself. Why wouldn't you do that?
Let me give an example.
Yeah.
there was a time,
Mhm.
let's say in any country
Mhm.
and in India, that there's a train that goes off rail
Mhm.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
The minister who would have built SOPs,
Mhm.
it would have been a human error, eventually a person's fault.
Yeah.
The minister then used to put his paper
Yeah.
down and resign from that position because that is the ethics that is coming in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The same thing happens thrice a day
Mhm.
or whatever, thrice a month,
Yeah.
a year. I'm not coming and commenting on the overall thing,
Yeah.
but now that person may not do that, right?
Correct.
And that is it a function that it was never that person's fault, but that person was too ethical,
Mhm.
or is it that like we need to have this because the original person needs to get whoever's human error was it has to be accountable, which was earlier as well.
Yeah.
But
No, so I think what you're talking about is, who does the buck stop at?
huh.
And the buck has to stop at the top. Right? It cannot. You cannot point out, for example, in the case that you took, you cannot point out at human error and say there was a human error and something happened. Maybe once, yes, but if it is a recurring thing, then you got to understand: did you deploy capital appropriately to make sure that the human error was proactively avoided? And if you haven't, then you need to take the moral responsibility for your capital deployment and act accordingly, right? Now, for someone who does that, great. For someone who does not do that, I think they will have to answer themselves to only themselves. And if they are happy with their line of decisions, then that's great for them. Might not be great for the rest of the world, but it's great for them.
Okay, if we take it in the lens of capitalism and we look at
Mhm.
businesses, right? There are insane amount of layoffs that we see happening
Yeah.
left, right, and center every day.
Yeah.
Right. Now, one way to look at it is, we are doing cost cutting. There are things, there's AI, these are the standard
Mhm.
sort of arguments that come from any of the businesses,
Yeah.
right? But would we not would the people
Mhm.
not is it an individual's fault to not be able to gauge that this is something that's gonna happen, or is it the fault of the person who is firing or whose team was it to would have figured out something earlier to make it usable that these people would not get fired? Where do we see that?
Yeah, I mean, there is no right answer to it.
Yeah, there's no right answer to it.
Depends
I'm just
a lot on the situation.
taking a POV here.
Yeah, so a lot of reckless hiring happens, which often leads to
Leads to
subpar,
ghosting.
right, which leads to subpar results, and then eventually, subpar outcomes, and at some point of time you have to take the hard call of laying people off. And then there is very conscious hiring that happens where you know that you will have sufficient runway for this person to stay in the company, this role to stay in the company. If the role is dying out because of AI or because of whatever reason, then you need to give them a fair chance to find another role within the same organization. And even when that is not feasible, or if it is purely a performance-driven challenge, then you actually request people to sort of step out. This can be done very humanely and ethically. A lot of times, what clouds your vision is access to insane capital. And I think one of the things that really differentiate, between companies that lay off frequently and the ones that do not is, how capital sensitive have they been, not just how much access to capital they had.
Yeah, agreed. So one of my friend's father was very early employee at Reliance
Mhm.
back when they were in cotton and
Mhm.
and that friend was telling me that on his third birthday, the money came, and that company operated obviously like a company, but in cases where you wanted a family, they became a family.
Yeah.
So that the growth of a company is actually very people driven.
Yeah.
The people who are part of the company eventually will make or break it for you.
Yeah.
And I've realized it because if I am taking the ownership of my work, plus I'm seeing something is going wrong, then I will go and write a mail to my CEO and be like, yeah, this is wrong, this
Yeah.
is happening, please, right? And that is that is something that you cannot get. Like
Yeah.
someone having a love for something that is yours, but
Yeah.
is still operating like it is mine.
True.
That's a very, very interesting take. Yeah,
Yeah.
like fair. I think I'm done with my set of questions.